Hello, I am C. Hunter Beaver, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am here today with our first episode of Hope This Helps, brought to you by Key Peninsula Counseling Center in Lake Bay, Washington. We hope this helps. We're always hopeful, if not always optimistic. Today, in our first episode, we will be discussing how to identify and understand the mental health professionals that you deal with in the mental health system. Now, myself, as you heard, am a licensed marriage and family therapist. But there are some things you should know, like the term therapist is considered by law a generic term. This also applies for counselor or reverend. Now, in the therapist field, often what happens is people will go out and they will get credentialed. Now, credentials are important, and any therapist that you see should be able to tell you what their credentials are. Now, credentials are state licensures that a person must go out and earn a certain amount of experience and do a certain amount of testing to show that they have the ability to do a job efficiently. This is very important when you're going to somebody and you're looking for help with life's problems. So as you sit here today and you listen to me, and I do appreciate you listening, I hope you like and subscribe. I will walk up the professional ladder of the mental health system to help you hopefully identify the person you're sitting across from. Okay. Now, as we get going, again, like I say, keep in mind the term therapist is a generic term, so be very careful out there. Again, look for certain credentials, and usually on any therapist business card, they will have their name followed by a comma, followed by such credentials as LMFT, which is my personal credentialing, which means licensed marriage and family therapist. LMHC, licensed mental health therapist, mental health counselor. LSW is a licensed social worker, and so on and so on. I will get into that as we go through this. So, the first step on the rung of the mental health professional ladder is you will see the credentials CDP or PC. Now, these two things are basically at the same level, and they stand for Chemical Dependency Professional, which is used in the substance abuse mental health field, and PC stands for Peer Counselor. Now, these people are often people who have been through the rungs of life and have taken the time to go get an education. Now keep in mind, both of these levels, both at this level, are simply certifications, meaning you know 12 to 18 months of education that just cover the very basics of the field of psychology. Okay? Now, I'm not saying anything bad. These are often people that have been through horrible experiences, have often, when you're talking about CDPs, chemical dependency people, these more than 50% are former addicts. These are people that have gone through it and are trying to come out the other side. Now, that's a very important thing to know, because there's a saying, and this is one that I found when researching all these topics, and I actually loved it. It was by Hunter S. Thompson, and it says, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. So what often you're looking at here is people that have been through it and then they turn pro. Now, there's a lot more first-hand experience here, I understand. And me being a master's level primate therapist, I personally can say I've never been addicted to heroin or meth or any of those things. I was very fortunate. I've got my degree when I was 23 years old, and I've been doing this for 15 years. It requires discipline and follow through, you know. So I didn't have time to do those things. Now, this is one thing we got to pay attention to here, though. When we talk about this, we also have to understand that even though 50% of the people in this field are addicts, we have to have a real concern because statistically, 70% of addicts relapse. Now, to understand how this can affect treatment is significantly important, folks. And I'm not even going to get into it, but it's something to be aware of when you're sitting across from that person and you look at their credentials. That's all I want you to know, okay? Now, I also say, you know, hey, these are the benefits, these are the problems you're going to run into. So when we're talking here, the benefits you're going to see, again, these are people that know where you're coming from. They know the pain you felt. The benefits are these are people that can tell you how they did it. Okay, now the problem I see and is that often here when you're looking, you know, these people look and they have a microverse vision. You know, a microverse. They say, this is how I did it. This is what worked for me. This would what worked for you. And they don't understand adaptation, that the world's a bigger place than just what they've been through. I mean, it's a tough thing. I've been there. You know, I don't mean any disrespect. It's just, you know, hey, you need to know more about this. There's more history to it. There's a bigger picture. You have to understand that. Okay. The next level we're going to look at is what's called a BS, or a bachelor's level therapist. Okay, now this is a problem as well, okay? Because these are people that have gone out, they've done the work, yet, you know, the state still says we don't trust you enough, you don't have enough education to make a valid diagnosis. You know, again, it's a tough thing. I've been through this. It's terrible for them, but you need to understand who you're dealing with here. Now, a 4-year degree will make you, you'll often be dealing with what are called, hospital social workers or case managers. These are often people in CPS or DSHS. So, what I'm talking about here, this is the problems you often run into here. Is like I say, these people have done a lot of work. They've gone out, they've studied 4 years, but then they're told you need to go another 2 years to get to this level. And then from that, you need another 3 years before we'll even consider you for a license. Oh, it's a tough road to hold. I'm really, trying to get that across to you more than anything, to get to the point where you can be considered a valid, we trust what you're saying. You do have to jump through so many hoops, folks. It's so hard. And all along the way, the people you're going to run into on this ladder of the mental health professional, you're going to run into these people are going to be the ones that say, hey, you need to go talk to these people. They can arrange, they can identify your resources. They're very smart people. The bad part is like I say, they don't often feel heard. They often feel like, oh, well, we don't hold this degree, so nobody wants to hear us. That's not the case. And let's move on, okay? Now we move up to the next level. And the next level is what's called master's level. This is going to be, if you see it on a card, it's MED or MS. The big M, that means masters. Now, these are people that have gone through their 4-year thing. They've gone through another 2 years. Now, if you see credentials, I said this earlier in the show, LMFT, licensed marriage family therapist, licensed mental health counselor, licensed social worker. These are big things, okay? And the big thing is, once you get out of your master's level, you don't just automatically get a license and they say you're smart enough to do everything. No, you have to go out and get at least 2 years of experience in most cases. And then you go and you take a big test and hopefully you pass and they say you're smart enough, we'll listen to you now. Okay? And it's it's rough. It's as I said before, it takes a lot of follow through. It takes a lot of courage. So anybody that's at this point, realize that's who you're sitting across from. But I do want you to understand there are still many different types of therapists or counselors you're going to be working with. So I'm going to do my best to explain it, okay? I usually break it down when I'm working and I have to work with other people. I break it down into, am I dealing with what I consider social workers, or am I dealing with therapists? Now, this is best described in a joke that I like to tell, okay? The joke being this. It says a fella gets up one morning and he's walking down the beach. And as he's walking down the beach, he sees a school of jellyfish that have just beached themselves on the sandy shore. As he's walking down the beach, he decides to help. So he picks one up and he throws it back in the water. And he picks another up and he throws it in the water. And he picks another and throws it and throws it. And a fella walking the other way, he stops and he says, "Man, do you see all the jellyfish that have beached themselves here? You'll never make a difference." And the man bends over and he picks up another one and he throws it in the water and he looks up and he says, "I made a difference to that one." You know, that's always been the difference to me between a therapist and a social worker. Are we working for the greater good, or are we working for some personal good? You know, I think it's best to save one jellyfish at a time. And that's what I've been doing for 15 years. I hope you understand. Now, when I talk about that, even, social workers at a master's level, these are often people you'll see. And as I say, they do try to focus on meeting expectations of society and fitting into the social aspect of life. It's a good thing. It's a fantastic thing. Oftentimes, though, you miss people's personal accounts of what's going on, and it's hard to break it down to the individual when you're looking at the bigger picture. You know, if you're looking at the microverse, that's one thing. If you're looking at the macroverse, that's another thing. And if you're somewhere in the middle trying to make sense of it all, that's being a therapist. Hope that helps explain some things. Now, whenever you're even talking about therapists, I need to explain there's even a difference there, folks. We're talking another offshoot, and the difference being, what are called family therapists and what are called individual therapists. People trained to deal with one person versus people trained to deal with a whole group of people. Not a group, but a family. And a family, is a lot different. The people that can deal with individuals can often deal with groups. That's a whole different thing. But a family therapist is dealing with, the old saying is this, sweet songs don't play long on broken radios. Now, oftentimes, you can fix the song, and that's great, and I hope it works out well for you, but oftentimes you have to fix the whole radio. When you look at a problem, you have to look at a bigger picture of just the problem. You have to see not only the individual, but the individual system. Now, we'll get into that, but ultimately, whenever I sit down with somebody, I try to explain to them what I do with two simple stories. And these are two stories that I definitely want to relay to you today. Again, I hope you I hope you subscribe. The two stories I always tell when I sit down with somebody. First is a story about a man that goes to a psychiatrist because he can't sleep. He's afraid there are monsters under the bed. Now, he goes to this doctor for months and months, and they try different medications. They try different analysis, different testing, all these things, and the guy can't sleep. He's afraid there are monsters under the bed. Well, one day he stops going and says, "Well, this ain't working for me." And lo and begonia, he runs into the doctor 2 weeks later at the grocery store. The doctor looks at him and says, "Man, you look well rested. What happened?" The man said, "I went and saw a therapist. He fixed it in one session." The doctor says he fixed it in one session. What did he say? He told me to cut the legs off the bed, he did. And you see, that's the difference a big difference in what you're looking for here, folks. I hope you understand that. You know, oftentimes we overlook simple solutions for more difficult ways of dealing with an issue. See this often with doctors, and I'm going to get into that in just a second, okay? But I'm going to tell you the second story that I have found after all these years of doing things that really describes what my view of the mental health game is, okay? And this is a silly story that has taken me years to perfect. And the story goes back to the late 80s. Ooh, long time ago. And a band called Van Halen. I don't know why that sounded so spooky, but it did. And this actually became a contractual thing with them, and it was very fascinating. And what it was, it has to do with green M&Ms. And the story goes that as the Van Halen got started many times, their guitarist Eddie Van Halen, he would walk out of a gig because there were green M&Ms in the dressing room. Now, nobody knew what it was, but he kept walking out of gigs because there were green M&Ms in the dressing room. Well, finally, years later, after all this time, this became a contractual obligation for anywhere they played. No green M&Ms in the dressing room. And nobody knew why. They said green M&Ms, they cause cancer. Green M&Ms, they cause sexual problems. Nobody knew. Years later, it comes out what the story is. And the story is this. Before Eddie, he was in the band. He was a roadie. He went with the bands, and he set up stages, and he set up sound systems, and he knew where every bolt that had to be tightened was, and he knew where every wire that had to be taped down was. And he was so good at his job that they made him a crew manager. And as a crew manager, Eddie developed a checklist. And on this checklist, he put 400 and some odd items that every show, he went down his checklist and he knew every bolt was tightened, every wire taped down. And it was always a good show. Never did he have a bad show. And then he got into the band. And as part of the band, he didn't have time to go and check every wire taped down and tighten every bolt. So Eddie figured, I'll just fax my list ahead. Well, he quickly figured out that he couldn't go back and double check a list of 400 items. So, Eddie thought. And in the middle of the list, Eddie wrote no green M&Ms in the dressing room. When he got to a show, he didn't have to look at 400 different items. He had to look at one. And if there were green M&Ms in that dressing room, Eddie knew they hadn't followed his list, and to him it wasn't a safe show. So this is what I teach people to do, is I teach them to look for green M&Ms in their lives, because unfortunately, we will never see the bigger picture. Our eyes look out. We don't look back at ourselves. We can look back at our past, and we always see hindsight's 20/20. But to see where we're going, we have to find these little telltale things to make sure that we're in a safe show. So I hope that helps us to understanding what a therapist does. Now, moving up to the next rung of the ladder. And this is an important thing that I want to make sure folks understand. The difference between a master's level therapist and a doctor, okay, in psychology or psychiatry. Because these are so important. This is when it gets really dangerous, folks. Okay? Now, when you're talking about a doctor of psychology, you need to understand, as I explained before, at a master's level, you can do your diagnosing, you can do everything else, and you have to go, wait a minute, do I want to stop? And do I want to pay another $60,000 to go to school for another 2, 3, 4 years? Or, just like Goodwill Hunting, can I get the same education from here on out and do the same amount of work for $10 in your late fees at the library? For those girls up at the Keys Hunter Library, I know I've had a lot more than $10 in fines, but I'm still paying for it. Anyhow, now moving on, understanding the next level is psychiatrists, and these are the doctors that you go to that prescribe psychiatric medication. Now, there's a lot that I disagree with when it comes to these ideas. And I often tell people that, sometimes the only difference between a doctor and a drug dealer is 8 years of college. There are times where, well, in one specific study in particular, there was a study that showed when you talk to a doctor, you only get about 45 seconds with them before they are off on their own little rabbit hunts. And by that, I mean, you get to talk to him about 45 seconds before he's all of a sudden thinking about what he wants to diagnose, thinking about what medication he wants to give you, thinking about what path he wants to go down, and you've lost his attention. Now, that's often a common thing with somebody that's gotten a lot of education, and they're very smart. I don't want to say anything bad about them, but they often are bored, and you lose their attention quickly. The problem is, you know you better than anybody else. It's just that simple, folks. As you go through this, remember this. You know you more than anybody, no matter how big of a degree they have. Now, there are often issues with communication between you and your doctor. There are often issues of communication between me and your doctor. If I talk to doctors, I often have issues of they don't want to hear from me. They don't think I'm as worthy as them. Again, they don't understand that, I stopped where I did because I could go for a $10 late fee in the library. They instead think, well, you don't have this credential, and multiple times I've been told, you don't need to be making these ideas, making these diagnoses, making this, you don't need to be talking to me is what it comes down to. You're just a primate. And I'm like, whoa, buddy, I know I'm a primate, but you're a primate too. Ha! We're all primates. Anyhow, so many communication issues, even between people with advanced degrees. This is important to realize. This is who you're sitting across from. Now, that being said, I really do want to discuss some red flags for doctors you may be sitting across from. This is important to me as a therapist because I get to deal with your everyday life, whereas they get to see you for 15 minutes. Meaning, for every 15 minutes they sit with you, often I've sat with you for 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 hours. So it really can be detrimental to me doing my job of dealing with you on a weekly basis, dealing with my folks on a weekly basis, as opposed to dealing with these doctors. Their refusal to talk medication is a big red flag. If they are unwilling to talk with you about how you feel and what you want to do, this may be a great big flag saying this is not the person you need to be getting your drugs from. Alright? Now, if they change your drugs regularly, if they change your medication on a regular basis, this can be an indication of some pretty scary stuff as well. Alright? And one of the links I would like to put in this will be a link to John Oliver presentation about marketing to doctors and understanding that your doctors are often marketed to and told, these are the medications you need to be giving out. I've seen this, I've done this, I know where it's going, I've had the free lunches. Good free lunches. But influence is often bought, and you need to understand that. Alright? So, I hope this has really helped you get through an understanding of the different levels of the mental health field. I am hoping that this has been helpful. I'm not optimistic that everybody has followed it through and everybody understands. But you know what? I've done my best here, folks. I hope you like it. I hope you subscribe. We're doing what we can here. KeepingItSLaCounseling.com. Enjoy it. I am C. Hunter Beaver, licensed marriage and family therapist. I look forward to talking to you again in episode 2, where we will discuss ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I'll have a presentation that I think you'll enjoy. I hope you've enjoyed the science and the statistics and everything that I've tried to lay out and looked into here. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye. What a rush!